welcome. Hi, everyone. My name is Jackie. I'm from the Educating All Learners Alliance. As you are entering into our webinar today, feel free to go ahead and tell us your name, the organization that you might be associated with, or your role. Are you a teacher? Are you a principal, parent, caregiver that is joining in today? Welcome. And I'm very excited to get into, our conversation today with Sylvia and Jared and Rebecca. So before we start, I'm going to share a few housekeeping items so we can all enjoy today's conversation. So if you want to go ahead and go on to the next slide. Awesome. So as I mentioned, my name is Jackie. I'm from the Educating All Learners Alliance. EALA for short. EALA is a coalition of over 140 organizations. And thank you, Aurora. My teammate from EALA has also joined in today. And we developed during March 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, as a support for caregivers and educators who work closely with students with disabilities. So what started out as, resource sharing has turned into, we host several different initiatives around the country with special educators and other education-based nonprofits. And we also have an accessible tech tool library on our site that is free and open access for educators and caregivers as well. Okay, so I'm going to just give a little background about what you can do in order to get the most out of our conversation today. So if you would like to join into the discussion, go ahead and post into the chat. We will be monitoring the chat to take any questions. If you have any, I see that Danielle Peterson has her hand raised. Danielle, are you having any issues?
Yes, I was trying to put some information here on the chat and it says it's disabled.
Okay, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. I will have our events team go ahead and fix that. So it's looking like the chat is disabled for attendees. Thank you so much. We will get that sorted out. So again, like I was saying, once the chat is enabled for everybody, you can post any questions. You can feel free to introduce yourself. We will also be utilizing the Q&A feature. If you look on your screen, you should see a question mark icon, and you can submit any questions through there. Again, we will be monitoring the chat and that feature as well to make sure we're answering all of your questions throughout the presentation and also at the end. If you close any other applications that might be running, that would help with bandwidth if you're experiencing any issues with any lagging on your device. If you are having any audio issues, you can try refreshing your browser window or even log in by using your phone by clicking the phone icon at the top of your screen. That has proved to be very helpful for some of our attendees in the past. And then to disable pop-up alerts from the chat, you can click the checkbox at the top of the chat. And then lastly, if you are tuning in from your mobile device, you can turn off notifications in the AnyMeeting Webinars mobile app settings. So before we dive into today's content, I am going to be introducing our speakers. So welcome to today's webinar, Unlocking Doors, Empowering Parents to Connect with Their Child Who Learns Differently. And this webinar is co-hosted by EALA, GAB-On, and Rebecca Rowland. My name is Jackie Keenan from EALA. We also have with us today Sylvia Hall, who is the proud mom of 2 teenagers and co-founder of GAB-On. With 15 years of career in strategic and relationship marketing, she pivoted her energy and dedication to navigating the world of special education in both private and public schools on behalf of her son who learns differently. Sylvia holds a certification from Harvard in family engagement and education. She has been recognized by Women's Net, Northeast ARC, Rhode Island 50 on Fire, and SIIA Cody Awards for GAB-On. She is living the adolescent parenting journey in the moment and tends to spontaneously bring rescue pups home. I love that. Welcome, Sylvia. And joining us today, we also have Jared. Jared is the proud mom of 2 teenagers and co-founder of GAB-On as well. He is an idea generator and GAB-On builder, and he is fearless when trying something new, especially those rescue pups that Sylvia tries to bring home.
Show up.
Sometimes they just show up. His resume includes years of business development and sales at Fortune 500 companies and startups domestically and in Europe. He started his first business at age 12 and went on to build the U.S. business for a Dutch startup and spent time in London to open a new technology market. He built GAB-On to connect with his kids and to show them how to be unafraid to start something from scratch and be involved in an effort for the impact it can have. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jared. And lastly, we have Rebecca. Rebecca Rowland is a Harvard lecturer, speech pathologist, and author of The Art of Talking with Children. She focuses on helping adults have great conversations with children, building children's skills, and enhancing relationships. I will now pass it over to Sylvia, Jared, and Rebecca to introduce themselves. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Jackie and Aurora and the EALA team. Hi, everybody. I'm Sylvia Hall. We are just so happy to be reunited with EALA. This is our second conversation we're going to have with you and your audience. So we're so happy to be here and very grateful. But Jackie, you did an amazing job introducing it. That was a lot of info. I think I'm going to shorten my bio because we want to dive in. Yeah, mom of 2 teens and rescuer of dogs and co-founder of GAB-On, and that kind of sums it up. So I'm just going to jump right in to our agenda for today. And we're going to start by sharing our story with you, a little bit about why we started GAB-On, about our journey as parents to get to the point of developing and creating GAB-On. And then we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into the research that talks to how important and the impact and the outcomes of connecting the parent and child relationship through conversation and how that impacts the whole child, in their whole child development, in their neurology, socially, emotionally, very personally, as a family. And then we'll get into the impacts and outcomes. What we've learned, again, along our way, what we've learned after using GAB-On from our researchers, from parents, educators, and from kids. So the big piece of this will be a lot of the research, and we are so grateful Rebecca has joined us today to help us in that part, because you probably knew it all before we did, and we're grateful for what you can share today. So without further ado, we'll just jump in, and I'm going to hand it over to Jared to tell a little bit about how this all came to be.
Yeah, so from an experience that I had with my son, Austin, he had a very early diagnosis. I think it started around 2 or 3 years old. We started getting information about some of the challenges he had at the neurological level, and what that impact had on school going forward. And that list of diagnoses kept coming. It started at 2. In first grade they came, in third grade they came, and they kept coming after that. And so the list got really long. And we were trying to understand how best to connect with Austin and how to help him in his journey through school, through life, and what we could do to be, better parents, more engaged parents. And we were different people. Austin and I, in terms of a father-son relationship, he and I were just different people. I loved being outside. I grew up very active in sports, working early with my father. Was part of the military for a little while, put me in social situations, put me into solving problems with people. I loved it. Austin was more quiet, more reserved. And I wanted to find a way to also very into sports. He wasn't. I was trying to find some area, some way to connect with him. And that's really where GAB-On came from. And, a question I had for myself with him was, how do I reach him? How do I be a better dad for him? How do I connect with my guy? It was a really big question I had for myself, and how to, make sure that he was having a good experience in life, because it's all about the connections. It's all about the relationships. And one of the areas I thought would be best to connect around would be school. I was in school 7-8 hours a day, like most of our kids. And I always wanted to say, how was your day? Fine. He'd say, what did you do at school today? Nothing. But what I learned later of talking with some experts and some of his teachers was there was a lot going on behind his fine and nothing. And 2 parts of it that were really critical, and I didn't understand until they were pointed out to me, was that his working memory, he has multiple diagnoses focused on executive functioning challenges in 2 areas specifically. Working memory was not allowing him to go back and recall his day and share it with me. He was trying. He was working really hard, but he could not remember his day. I didn't understand that at first. And the other part of it was processing delays. As I was asking questions, I was almost asking him to show up the way I understood how to show up as a 30-year-old when we had Austin at this point. And it wasn't fair to him. But I didn't know that until I started to dig into the problem. But now I knew the problem. Memory and processing. I need to be more patient, but I need to give him the ability to recall this day. I need to keep providing hints and reminders about his day that he can then use to reflect and gather that information in his mind and tell a story. That's really how we got started. And so that's really what's going on from a GAB-On perspective is as students, all our kids go to school, they have these different lessons and activities and events that happen in school. And at the end of the day, during the classes, Austin and other kids will stop and enter hints and reminders, 3 to 5 words that are used to remember what happened during the day, a catalyst. Okay, I was in social studies and we talked about the triangle hats, or I was in science and onion skin and lake water. It puts them where they were. They can go back and remember what happened and pull that information forward and have a conversation. But it's all student-led. A lot of parents want information about the day. I wanted to know about his context, his perspective, his experiences, and he had to share that with me. So it's really him leading the conversation and us engaging in a dialogue about his day. That's what I was really desperate for as a dad. I wanted that connection.
So I'm going to jump in because I'd love to invite Rebecca to talk a little bit here about why that it's not talking to or at, it's really talking with, and it's the back and forth conversation and dialogue. And Rebecca's done so much research behind this that if you wouldn't mind taking just a few minutes talking, expanding on it a little bit more, that would be wonderful.
Sure, definitely. So thank you. I'm really excited by this work because I think it does align so well with what we know about child-driven conversations, and especially about how it builds children's language skills, but even their sort of social brain. So there's a sense that they're actually learning how to relate to people and how to engage with people. So I love that story of just sort of really starting child-driven. And this is a slide that really talks more about why it's so important to do that, not just about children's brains, but even more about building the relationship. So that sense that starting with children's ideas lets them know that we care about them as people. So rather than just saying, oh, I'm going to ask about homework, or I'm going to ask about something you're doing at school, to really get at kind of what's driving them. You know, what are they really interested in? What are they motivated by? And not just sort of in general, sort of an age and stage thing, but really in this exact moment. So what actually is on their minds now? So otherwise, it also develops their empathy. So they're taking other people's perspective as they're thinking, well, what is that person interested in? And why are they motivated by that? And brings them into a family. So feeling as if, you know, your son or your daughter, you're really connecting with them to feel as if they belong. And we know so much about the importance of feelings of belonging at the family level and then at the school level too, to help children feel attached, to help them reduce their behavior issues, and really to support them in their long-term thriving. So just really excited by this. And I do think there's more and more research showing the importance of these child-driven conversations. So I'll turn it back to you, but feel free to ask me anything else as you go.
So I'm going to just pick up on one thing you said, because it kind of gave me this little aha moment. And that was, as a mom of a kid who learns differently, I always found I was focusing on his challenges, right? Like through the IEPs, through the meetings at school with special education, it was, okay, he needs to meet these certain criteria. He needs to do this much work. He's going to meet these goals. And so we were always focusing on his challenges, which is so important. And we have to support those. But what I loved about what you said is when you have conversations with them and they're telling you what happened in their day that they want you to know about, that they want to share with you, really it's leaning towards where do they find their joy in learning? Like, where are they finding their joy? Where does the clock go by really fast in that part of their day? What do they love to do? And that insight was huge for me as a mom, because what I was able to do then is start to embellish on those areas. Like, he was a builder. Austin was a born builder. He built with his food, with Lego, with the wooden blocks, you name it. He built it, welding. But it was through that journey and understanding where his eyes lit up that I was able to put him in after school organizations, summer programs, other programs all weekends. Even if it was just for 3 hours in the morning, we'd find a building shop and we'd be able to find the areas where he found joy, where he'd then find his peace, where he loved, be proud of the work he was doing, where he really felt he could be successful. And it was through learning about what he wanted to share with us and what made him light up. That was the insight that we were able to find and discover in him, and then help him navigate and journey towards that. I probably just jumped ahead way into the presentation, but that finding the joy was huge for us. Yeah, where they find their joy.
And one of the things so from this point forward, everything we're going to talk about is some of the research and the findings that we learned about through our journey helping Austin. So everything I hope going forward is tracked right. We give credit where credit is due for all the research that we learned about. If it's marked wrong or labeled wrong, my apologies ahead of time. But everything going forward is research that we learned about. And I'm bringing it up because the science behind what we did is really powerful. The evidence is powerful, but we had no idea that this evidence existed when we started this process. We didn't know the science behind the neurology, what it would do for Austin's neurology, what it would do for his sense of belonging, what it would do for his sense of, what it would do for his future. All I knew is I was desperate to connect with them. But going back and connecting the dots, we found that there's a lot of research that supports, the role of the parent, the neurology, what the impact on neurology and the impact of the future experiences that he's going to have. So that going forward, all of this is, we're just trying to put in parents speak. So it's easy digestible and easy to understand. But one of the first things that we came across, or a very powerful part of this, was Ned Hallowell's quote about what he calls vitamin C. And I've been reading about Ned Hallowell since I was in college, because I got my diagnosis of ADD back then. But he's done so much research on it. I really respect where he's coming from. But this point about vitamin C was so powerful. It's all about the connection. Connection is free, but it's got to be engaged. It takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of effort, and the ability to give your child a little bit of power about what you talk about. How do you engage? And so this was so strong. It really validated what we're doing on the pure connection level. But the other thing that was really the biggest aha moment that was fairly recent was the idea of not just belonging, which Rebecca referenced a few minutes ago, but what hit me hard was belonging uncertainty, the exact opposite of belonging. And that to me was really the essence of what we're dealing with Austin. He was dealing with deep belonging uncertainty, and I'll get to the definition of it in a minute. And I think a lot of people, the professionals on this webinar, but even the parents may have heard about the general idea of what belonging is. And Dr. Leary and Baumeister from 1995 did a seminal work about belonging. I've read it, and it's incredibly insightful about what belonging is and the power it has over mental well-being, mental health, physical health. But ultimately, it is a foundational need that every person has some type of connection, especially with family and parents, is the essence of what we're looking at from a belonging perspective. But it needs to have, effective, pleasant interactions with few other people. Austin wasn't getting that at school. He wasn't having those pleasant experiences. He was actually having challenges with his peers and with school in general, the system of school that was set up. And those interactions must take place in the context of a stable and enduring framework. School is pretty stable, but those experiences he was having was not. And that's where belonging and certainty comes in. It's so powerful. Dr. Cohen and Walters did some work a little while ago, back in 95, I believe it was, that really outlined what belonging and certainty was. But really, it's a simple question. Do I feel like I belong in the situation that I'm in or with the group of people that I'm in? And looking back on it, Austin did not feel like he had belonging in school. He did not have belonging certainty. He had belonging uncertainty in school and with the peer groups and the groups that he was a part of. It's really all about we're more readily to infer we were incapable and not able to do the work at school, and that just compounded day after day after day the experiences that he had. But what was interesting was they do have a fix, and that was sharing the experiences of people who are having challenging experiences with other people that are having challenging experiences. At the very least, it's people understanding and accepting the people for the challenges that they were having, the struggles that they were going through, being heard, And when Austin started to experience being heard by us and by me about it, what he was going through at school, he literally started to sit up straighter. He started to engage differently. And his work at school really changed dramatically. And this chart we put together was really Austin's journey. And so best we can do is talk about the journey we had, the experiences that we had with Austin. We hope that it reflects what could happen with other families and their children. But in our experience, K through 3, Austin was very engaged. He felt a very strong sense of belonging. He was part of school. He was part of his peer group. He was part of clubs. But after 3rd grade, something shifted. He started to really disconnect from school and from his peer group. He got challenges, and he was more reserved and off to the side in school. I mean, we got really concerned. And this was the point where I started to get concerned from a dad's perspective about how can I engage with him to just help him feel like he was part of the overall, his world. But at this point in time also, it's pretty normal for kids to want to reach out to their peer group and have family become less of a priority and their peer group and their friends become bigger priority. But he was having a hard time connecting with his friends. It was a hard time connecting with peers at school. The clubs and organizations that he was struggling to be a part of them. School was just brutal for him. He really came home frustrated and upset a lot. And so this is where we were concerned that if this continued from 4th or 6th grade, it was going to go right through high school. But what we found was bringing in GAB-On, we really changed his trajectory. We didn't know this was going to happen when we did this. I just wanted to be there for him when he came home from school. I wanted to be there for him as a dad. But what we'll get into is the research really plays into the neurology of Austin's development and how that helped him be more engaged with school. And also, when he started to feel a bigger belonging, stronger belonging at home, everything started to change. Part of what Sylvia referenced earlier was he was also talking about what he was interested in, what excited him, and where he was having success, but also where he was having failures. And we were able to navigate with the help of school where he spent his time, who he spent his time with. We didn't over-engineer it. We just tried to put him in places that were helpful for him, that we gave him a sense of belonging in his interests. We really just saw his trajectory change because he was getting more involved with these different groups and different things. Didn't solve everything. He still had problems with peers, but it wasn't as big of a problem. He was still having real big challenges at school. He was able to engage with his teachers and his special ed teachers more consistently. And he actually found his voice. He was able to advocate for himself and say, I need help more. He had confidence in himself. And so this was the trajectory we saw evolving with our guy through the process.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that, like being able to have those conversations at home and almost, it'd be a safe space for him to tell us things that were happening at school, that the GABs would be the spark and the prompt to have those conversations. By having those conversations, it gave him the confidence to then, try it out in different arenas. And it built his confidence, it built his self-advocacy skills as he went along.
And so, from a research perspective on the human development side, one of the things we've learned through numerous experts in human development, psychology, speech language pathology, is that parents occupy a very critical position in the mental health of their children, especially those parents who have kids with special needs. We're really on the front line. We're really engaging with them more consistently on a more every day, and different than most families. Dr. Corey Cobb actually wrote a paper about something about this from a mental health perspective, that there just aren't enough mental health experts. There aren't enough people out there to support our kids. But parents are in a position to really have an influence of the mental health of the child. We didn't know that beforehand, but that's what we were doing. We're kind of putting ourselves out there to be that front line and engage with them, to find out what's going on. How can we help? What's going on at school with his peers? The other part of this was, Dr. Ann Henderson we found a quote from her and some research from her about the fact that the most accurate predictor of a student's success in school is the extent to which the parent is engaged in that child's experience. And that's what we were doing without knowing we needed to do that. We just wanted to be involved. And this was next point about youth, they begin to spend more time with peers. And we started to really make GAB-On available to more people beyond our family. we got a lot of feedback from people saying, well, in middle school, it's not going to work. Kids don't want to talk to their parents. They don't want to engage with their parents. And when they get to high school, they completely check out. We actually ran our own focus group in Providence, Rhode Island, with a group of middle school students. And overwhelming feedback that we got from those middle school students was, I really want to talk to my parents, but I don't know how. They're busy, I'm busy. But the physical reaction to talking about this was interesting. They got really sad. I want more conversation with my parents. I wanted to know what's going on in my life. I want to share my experiences at school. I want to know what's going on with them, but I don't know how to do that. They're not, geez, GAB-On can help them do that. And so the social connections that kids have really drive so much of their experiences in the world and the trajectories of their world at many different levels. But it really, at the heart of this, is really where the parent sits, and they have such a strong, powerful connection with their kid that can make such a big difference. And I think in our culture, we start backing off from our kids because we don't want to get too involved. We want to give them their space. But I think kids really need need us as parents more and more, and more than we know. And one of the biggest messages coming out of our experience was parents really, really matter. It doesn't have to be dialogues. It doesn't have to be huge conversations. You just need to know you care and you're interested. Rebecca, anything you'd like to add into that?
Yes, no, definitely. I mean, I think that is something that so much research is showing now, especially just even earlier and earlier, how conversation really involves words, but even involves more than words. So even things before children can talk. So starting with gesture, starting with noticing an eye gaze and talking about the same things. So I think that the sense of conversation as connection and attachment kind of going through the whole child's lifespan, I think is becoming more and more of interest in both mental health, but physical health and resilience, all playing a role in that. So yeah, I think this is a great line of research.
Thank you, Rebecca. And one other thing I'd like to add in here is about the use of technology and how a lot of the kids are involved with online services, whether they're playing games or on their phones. One of the things that Dr. Corey Cobb also highlighted was that the fact that a lot of these kids are quite lonely, being on social media, their confidence is being eroded. They're seeing a false narrative of what the future and what real success is all about. And that at this point in time, some parents and some kids are using apps for mental health perspective. There are ones with video capabilities that are very powerful because there is human interaction in that. But some of these other apps that are being used, there's actually another study that was developed by Dr. Goldberg who looked at the efficacy of some of these apps that are used for mental health, for anxiety, for depression, where there's no human interaction. And those have shown that there's no efficacy within those apps. So Corey Cobb was talking about the fact that this is really where parents can slide in and really be so powerful and so helpful for their kids. And then on a neurological level, this really blew me away. I remember sharing our experience with GAB-On with someone in the neurology field. And I told them the story, and they looked at me and paused for a few minutes. And they said, "Do you know what you're doing for your son?" I said, "Yeah, having a connection. I'm having a conversation. That's really cool. I'm hearing about his day." And she said, "Did you ever hear about the Hebs theory, the Hebs effect?" So I don't understand what you mean. And the essence of this comes back to neuroplasticity, that from a Hebs perspective, the neurons that fire together wire together. And that led me to read a book by Dr. Norman Doidge called The Brain That Changes Itself. And through that book, he talks about how there's certain parts of the brain that could be damaged either through an accident, an illness, but some part of brain damage that is supposed to take care of some aspect of that person's life is not usable. But other parts of the brain can actually pick up that workload and take it over for that part of the brain, and that function is actually followed through on or provided by a different part of the brain. After an explanation by this neurologist, she said, "What you're doing to Austin is you're actually in a way rewiring his brain because his working memory isn't very strong, but it's now becoming a little bit better." Because she asked, "How long did it take him to remember his first GAB?" I said, "It took about 90 seconds." And she said, "How long has it taken 3 months later?" I said, "It's almost instantaneous." And she said, "That's the power of the Hebs effect, that you can actually rewire the brain." We did not cure Austin. We did not change Austin. I want to make that really clear, but we did give him a tool that allows him to have better recall, which allowed him to be more involved with school, with his classroom work, also allowed him to be more engaged with his peers and his friends. it helped. It was a tool that really helped elevate that part of his engagement with the world.
And one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Yeah.
And another piece of the puzzle was Dr. John Gabrielli out of MIT did a study that just, it added right to what Dr. Hebbs and Dr. Deutsch I learned from those two. And he looked at the dialogue between a parent and a child. They actually put recorders on a child, and they looked at the conversations back and forth between the parent and the child. And what they found was when there was dialogue consistent every day for a period of, I think it was about a month or two, they took pictures of the brain through fMRIs before and pictures after the experiment. What they found was the parents and the child had dialogue back and forth, not one talking to the other, not one reporting to the other, but the actual conversation back and forth. There was biological growth in that brain. And Dr. Gabrielli talks about how it's almost magical how that parent conversation appears to influence the brain in the child. So it's just the evidence here is so powerful that this engagement is really doing so much good for the child at the neurological level. Another piece that I was introduced to was when Austin goes through school with so much belonging uncertainty, there's an enormous amount of stress and anxiety that goes along with that. And with that stress and anxiety comes cortisol. And when a child is living with a high level of cortisol, which a lot of these special ed kids are, because they don't feel like they belong, that cortisol is putting them in a place of almost unable to learn. The cortisol puts them in the brain in a state where they can't really absorb the information that's coming out of at school. They're really dealing with what's coming at them. And anything that's an emotional reaction to a certain situation, you almost feel like a physical attack as well. So they're in a place where they really aren't learning, they weren't engaging because the cortisol was being released. However, when you start showing engagement with that child and the child starts to feel belong, starting to feel connected, oxytocin kicks in. And that's where a child can start learning and feeling more part of the groups that they're in, because, oxytocin is considered the bonding hormone. They feel like they're part of something and they're a better place for learning, but also a better place just for existing and being a part of whatever world they're in, whether it be school, groups, whatever that is, they're going to feel like they're part of that team, part of that group. Rebecca, anything else you want to add to this? Are you on mute, possibly?
Yeah. Sorry, I was muted. I definitely just want to underscore the importance of that, and especially of Dr. Gabrielli's work. I think showing that it's both sort of a language experience, but even a social experience. You're kind of doing two things as you're talking with a child, and really just exploring that the relationship as you're exploring the language. I think it's not one or the other. So I think that's so important. So I love that.
Great, thanks. And then on the emotional level, we had talked a minute about how kids going through fear, living with fear is so hard. And, I love Dr. Ned Hallowell's quote where, fear is the major learning disability, fear and shame, which so many of these kids are dealing with because they just either from a working memory perspective, from a processing speed perspective, they can't keep up. They're struggling to be a part of the learning process. And without that connection to the classroom that's positive, they're really falling behind at so many levels of the social experience, the emotional experience, the school experience. And when you can really connect with that child and give them that sense of belonging, it removes that fear because now they have a place that's safe. And that's what it turns out we did with GAB-On, to create a safe place to have conversations, safe place to exist, where the child can feel strong and powerful and a part of something. And when kids start to feel like they're valued, Dr. Dana Mitra talked about when kids are feeling valued and their perspective is being heard and respected, they begin to develop a sense of ownership and attachment. And that's what we saw in Austin. It was really amazing how when he started the 6th grade and we were using this GAB-On, he started, he'd started the classroom experience quite quiet, quite reserved, didn't want to put his hand up, didn't want to engage. But by the end of the year, he won the Grit Award, because the teachers came to us and said, he's advocating for himself. They knew he had some challenges, but he started to stand up and say, I don't understand. Can you please explain that to me? First, it was one-on-one with the teacher. Then the hands started going up in classroom. He was coming from a position of being accepted, and he felt like he was accepted at home more than he was previously. And that allowed him to be more present and aware and engaged in the classroom. So it really changed his whole experience. And a child with that agency and getting that voice can really change the trajectory, because as they learn that they can talk and they can engage with the community in a way that helps them grow, helps them develop, helps them feel like they're part of something, they can find and navigate to where they're going to be successful. And again, that's what we saw in our experience, was Austin started putting himself in the classroom in a way that he felt comfortable. He became part of the school community in his own way, but he's still part of that community. And the agency really changed the way things evolved. And Dr. Mike Docular, another one of our advisors, has done extensive research. And when he found out about GAB-On, he got excited about the innovative approach to really giving child a voice in the agency. Whether using GAB-On or another vehicle to do that, giving the child the agency and the voice is so powerful, and they're able to own themselves, experience the world that they live in their own way.
I'm going to throw one more in here, because I always look at this through the lens of a mom, and I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown. And so I don't know when she said this, but I actually just saw it the other day, and she talks about fitting in versus belonging. And our neurodiverse kids, they want to fit in so badly. They want to please so much. They want to have friends and be social and be accepted. And again, when we talked about at a very young age, they internally know they're different. They start to go down that path. And so it can put them in uncomfortable situations in trying to fit in. And the difference between fitting in and belonging are different. And belonging, as we talked about earlier, is you knowing you belong with people you're in the situation you're in. And fitting in is that square peg in the round hole, I think they talk about. And there's a great difference. So if anyone has an opportunity to see that Brene Brown, just look fit in versus belonging. And she does a great 2-minute explanation. And it resonated with me. And Rebecca, again, I invite you to anything you can add and embellish on here. We would love to hear it.
Yes, definitely. I mean, I think too, just that sense of opening it up to the child, of having those back and forths. So not just sort of one back and forth, but then having multiple back and forths, kind of letting the conversation evolve over the course of the days, over the course of the weeks. It's really bringing a child kind of into that journey with you, of saying, okay, I want to open this up as sort of a family tradition of this is how we can belong with each other. And I think that is so powerful. So yeah, I think that the value piece is really huge here.
That's such a great point, because when we always talk about the back and forth, like the conversation. So when a GAB comes home, for instance, science, onion skin and lake water was our very first GAB. That gave Austin the space to tell us what he did in science class that day. And it was a really long story, and which was incredible. We learned more about his day than we ever had before. But it also then allowed us to share our experiences that we had to go down to the pond, or, like you went down to the pond and got lake water and looked at under a microscope, and that was in effect the GAB. And then we talked about your experiences fishing in the pond, my experience falling into a pond. But yes, we were sharing our stories. We were relating to each other. He was learning more about us at the same time as we were learning more about him. And so I love that it's not a staged conversation. A GAB is 3 to 5 words. It's a spark. And so there's nothing, it's not a sentence. It's not, nothing is, it flows. It's that simple. It's that spark to start that back and forth dialogue that just flows. And there are a lot of aha moments and surprises and awareness that comes from that. And I'm going to add one more thing. I'm going to actually go back a couple of slides, because what I often think about is what happened if we had in this slide put GAB-On, move GAB-On forward a little bit between like grades 3 and 4, and the impact that has if we added, that earlier, where we can help, where we start. And to Rebecca's point earlier, you started at a very young age, even before conversation is possible, right? You start these connections.
And maybe we can pause here for a second, Jackie, if there's any questions that we could address.
Sure. So we did have one question asking, do students use GAB-On only in school?
No, we can actually, we used it with Austin and our daughter as well in other areas, whatever groups they're a part of, after school programs, clubs, and they used it. We got GABs on all those different topics.
Yeah, what we did, and we had other families do this, is we connected with Austin's resource teacher, special education teacher, and asked her to give him a minute and a half in his day in her class to just write, pick his topics and write his gaps. And so he did that from school, but then he also went to camp and we used it. We actually worked with a camp in Texas and they had their kids using it. We've had kids use it when they're away at grandpa and grandma's for the weekend and they write down their gaps. So it's whenever they're spending time away from you and that, it helps them be able to share their experiences wherever they are away from you. And sure.
And then we have one more question. Will the PowerPoint be available after this presentation as well?
Sure.
Yeah, we'd be happy.
Okay.
Jenny, maybe we can send that to you and then you can
Yep, absolutely. We will be, this is being recorded, so we will edit and record and send this out and we will send out the PowerPoint too.
Beautiful.
Yes. And one of the things I'd love to say is that, we appreciate the opportunity to talk about our experiences. We appreciate the talk, we've called what we do GAB-On, but I think the message that we're really trying to get across here is however you can connect with your child, whether you use technology, you do something else, that we want to really highlight the power of that parent engagement and that back and forth dialogue, and how powerful that is for the child, but also for the parent. When we know our child's in a better place, we're in a better place. And that helps the whole family. So we're really advocating for connection, for engagement, and for dialogue. And that's what we're trying to present today, is that it really helps the child at so many different levels that we never knew even existed, never mind the research. But I just got curious and started reading and reading and reading because I just found it fascinating that something so simple that these conversations can lead to a change in the brain, a change in the neurology, a change in how the child actually experiences the world, because they start to feel like they matter and that they can start talking on their own behalf going forward. So some children are not able to talk on their behalf, but still those that can have more powerful voices. And this slide right here just talks about like how we were able to gather the hints and reminders about our guy's day and be able to use that as a reflection point to go back and remember where he was, whether it be in science or whether it was in social studies, wherever was going on in his day, and then pull that forward, because you had to actually go through the mental gymnastics of figuring out where was I, what was happening, who was I with, what experience was going on, then how do I tell the story and engage in a conversation. So that was our objective. However you do that, however you can help your child do that is so important to really help with their school experience, but life experience as well. And one of the GABs that Sylvia just shared was onion skin and lake water, and she walked through that one.
Real quick, sorry.
Another one is armor. We thought this was really interesting to show as an experience because it really highlights how setting up bridging the connection and making that connection safe in back and forth dialogue can pay back so many dividends as you develop the relationship. Can you tell that story?
So Armor was a GAB that came home in Austin's 8th grade, and Austin and Jared do welding. And so when that GAB came home and we were around the dinner table, we had company that night, and he said, I'm not sure if I remember what Armor means, this GAB. And I'm like, well, is it about welding? So I did the thing I shouldn't do. I jumped in and made an assumption. You'd think I would know by using it after all this time, but welding, it's about welding. We're going to do welding. We started talking about what you might want to read while welding or working together with Jared. And that was at the dinner table. The next morning at breakfast, it was just Austin and I at the breakfast table. And he said, Mom, I actually remember what armor means. It's the invisible armor I have to put on when going into science class because the two boys sitting behind me are teasing me and setting me up to get in trouble with the teacher. And I don't know what to do. And that was such a moment for us because it allowed me to help him and guide him how to navigate that in the classroom and how to talk to his teacher about it. It also allowed me to pick up the phone and call the school and get him a little support in that situation. And so it was just knowledge for me and to know that experience he was going through. And so some of the GABs are funny and light. Some of them were learning what they're learning about, and they're excited to share it, like national parks. That our daughter did a whole video on it. The car didn't blow up. It wasn't one of ours. It was another student's, and that was also very enlightening. But some of them are moments where we can really help our kids deal with situations that, because of their neurodiversity, they may not be able to navigate themselves. They just need a little more help.
Mm-hmm. And so, kind of coming to conclusion on our discussion today, what we found was that, when we started to connect better as a family, when we started to become more informed as parents, we really empowered Austin and our other child, our daughter as well, because it gave them literally a seat at the table to share what was going on in their day. And what we didn't know was everything that was going on behind the scenes. We didn't know what it was doing for their biological development, their neurological development. We also didn't understand or put a name to agency and voice. All we knew was, we used the word grit. All we knew was he was standing up for himself more and having conversations, because he was in a safe place to have those conversations. And there was that dialogue. And what it really led to was more confidence. He stood up straighter. He sat up straighter. He was talking to his teachers and his peers differently. And that was really through the agency that he developed. And then also that sense of belonging. I really had no idea about belonging and uncertainty until I read that work by Cohen and Walters. And then Dr. Cohen's gone on to write a book about belonging. And in it, he talks about belonging and uncertainty. I also read a interview that he gave about just generally in school, how chronic belonging uncertainty can be. And in some ways, crippling it can be as well for children. Because when they don't feel like they belong, when they don't feel like they're part of what's going on, they pull back. They don't have the confidence. They don't have the agency to stand up. It's a self-fulfilling cycle. It can really get more and more challenging as that child grows and develops throughout school. Listen, they're not getting the most social development, academic development experiences that are going on. And not every child is going to go on to college, and every child is going to go on to further their education from an academic perspective, but they all are going to be engaging in the world. They're all going to be learning and continuously learning throughout their life. How do we set them up in a way that they can continue to learn, continue to engage in a way that's good for them?
And thrive.
Thrive. Yes.
In whatever that way that means for them.
And again, it comes back to finding a way to do that with your child, however you can do it. So let me pause there and see if there's any more questions, Jackie.
Yeah. So we have one. Does GAB-On also provide conversation starters?
Yes. So that's really provided by the child. So what we do is, I'll give you an example. Let me go back to this one right here, fire drill at the bottom. This led us to using different prompts. So the way it originally worked was we'd have science, math, English, art, whatever it was a drop-down menu of options of what the child would be experiencing through the day. And I was working with a mother who had a child who was high-functioning autistic, and she wanted to try this. So we tried it. And what she said was, at the end of the day, he felt like he was reporting, and it brought on an awful lot of anxiety. Is there a different way we could do this? And we came up with the idea of some prompts. What made me laugh today? What made me proud today? What challenge did I overcome? And I think that that's a really interesting way to get a child to talk about something that they had an emotional experience with that's easy, that is not reporting, that is not anxiety filled. And so we do add those questions in. And I also like to bring in Rebecca, because the book that she wrote, The Art of Talking with Children, she highlights different questions, different topics that can be raised that the child can write a GAB about as well, or can start a conversation. Rebecca, do you want to talk about some of the prompts that you talk about in your book?
Definitely, yeah. So just to summarize, so I have a whole appendix of topics and questions that you can use by age and stage at the back of my book, which I really do think about even by topic. So thinking about empathy and kind of what are questions you could ask that support a child's empathy, or that support their confidence or social skills, things like that. So I think it really does align well with this, not necessarily to use them in tandem, but really to use both as inspiration if you were using a GAB and things like that. So, I mean, even things as simple as if your child sort of points at a ball or talks about a ball rolling across a table, asking for a young child, where do you think it's going? Or how could we make it roll even faster? Or, how would these two balls roll differently? So you're kind of creating these experiences and opportunities for a child to engage more with what they're already interested in. So I think that's why it's really interesting to start with something they're already curious about as you deal with the GABs, and then even just kind of to go from there.
Great. Any other questions, Jackie?
Nope, that was it for now. And again, I do encourage folks to utilize the Q&A function, or if you have any questions for Jared, Sylvia, or Rebecca, you can also put them in the chat as well.
So we have a lot of experiences with different families that have created that safe space, have used the child to create their own, have had the child create their own prompts. In this instance, it was through GAB-On. But what they were able to do was give the child that opportunity to have a conversation. And there's just been really great feedback about what's going on in that child's day, but more importantly, how the child's doing, what's happening in their day. We had another family who has a high functioning autistic child, and they used GAB-On, and one of their experience was quite emotional. We actually did an interview with her to better understand what exactly was going on with the experience of having these conversations. And what was so powerful from the interview with Andi Janoe was the fact that she said it was a key to a door that she was desperately trying to unlock to her child's world. When the child was in a safe place, when the reminder was given, the time was given, and the space was given to do, because of the processing delays, the child was in charge of how quick he responded when they brought the conversation forward and the pace of that conversation. It allowed the child to be more present and share more. And the trajectory of that child's conversation changed dramatically because they led it, both the information that was shared and the pace of that conversation. But it was so powerful that the child really started, almost similar to Austin's experience. He started to engage with his peers differently, wanted to go to more clubs and more groups, because at home he was feeling more a sense of belonging. So we've got all kinds of feedback from it, but again, it all comes back to just having that connection and that opportunity to have that dialogue.
Yeah, she also shared that her child started remembering names of kids in class and started sharing emotions, and then started gamifying GAB-On.
Yeah, that's right.
By writing something like Zap. And she'd be like, what the heck does that mean? And of course, that's the whole point, right? Is you don't know. The conversation has to happen. And he would come home and be like, so you want to know about Zap? Let me tell you about Zap. And it's a game they play and you get Zap or not Zap. But yeah, he started gamifying. We've heard that a few times from the students to have some fun with it.
So one of the things we'd like to highlight today is if anyone would be interested in taking part in an experiment, a study with us. We're working with some of the premier colleges in the country because they found out what we're doing, and they see GAB-On as a way to really study the impact of the family dynamic and the family connection. We're looking for 10 families who have a child with ADD, ASD, dyslexia, nonverbal learning disorder, who would be willing to participate in some conversations with us, do some feedback surveys, some interviews, just so we could really study other families in a more research-specific environment. And with that, we'd be able to provide some coaching, both from us and some experts, about not just how to have not just about GAB-On and how to use it, but actually from the experience of teaching children how to have conversations from a therapeutic perspective and how that could help you as a family overall. We'd like to start the research in March. So if anyone's interested, please reach out to us and let us know. And we'd love to get on a call and talk about it, share some more about what we're going to do. The data will be, be your data. We're not looking for anything that's too personal. We're just looking for the experience and the outcomes that you have and really growing the relationship between you and your child. So just send us a note. Be willing to sign up for a 12-week commitment, a few short interviews, and we'd love to have you participate. Before we wrap, just want to see if Rebecca, is anything else that you'd like to highlight from your experience?
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm excited to hear how this goes.
Super. To find us, if you want to learn more, you can find us in the Play Store, the Apple Store, or our website. I will also say we covered a lot in a short amount of time. The amount of research that we talked about and the scope and scale of that research, it's pretty big. I've spent a lot of time reading. I've got those documents, a lot of writing on them. If anyone wants to talk about any of this stuff or explore more of what's going on in our experiences with this data, either as a professional or as a parent, we'd love to get on a call. We'd love to talk about this and help in any way that we can, or share in different venues and different experiences as well. We're very passionate about this because not only what it did for our child, what's happening to other children along the way. We seem to be in a new space. All the research that's out there has been there for a long time. The only thing we did was connect it in a different way and put something in the middle, a tool that's in the middle of all of that allows all of it to come to life, to action all of that research, to make it real for families. However we can help, we'd love to participate.
And Jared and Sylvia, we do have a question in the chat. Do you have any experience or feedback regarding using this method with deaf or students who are hard of hearing?
Not yet. We'd love to. If whoever's asked the question would like to participate in this research from that perspective, let's talk. We'd love to explore that.
Awesome. Thank you. And that was Danielle. So Danielle, if you are interested, again, all of this information will be sent out via email,
including our contact information. But please feel free to reach out to me at sylvia@GAB-On.com. I also just want to highlight that we've referred to Rebecca's book multiple times through the conversation, and this is the longest link in history. My apologies, Rebecca. It's to Amazon. But The Art of Talking with Children by Rebecca Rowland is family changing, life changing. So Rebecca, thank you for writing it and sharing. And Jackie, if there's anything that we can help you wrap up with, if there's any other questions, anything in the chat we want to address, happy to do it now. We probably have like 2 minutes left.
Nothing else in the chat right now, but I can go ahead and wrap up for you if you'd like. So thank you so much for everyone for attending. Thank you to Jared, Sylvia, and Rebecca for speaking. Again, this will be sent out through a recording. So if you're interested in watching again, and welcome to those of you who are watching after the fact, who are watching on the recording. So again, thank you, everyone. This was Unlocking Doors, Empowering Parents to Connect with Their Child Who Learns Differently. And if you'd like to stay in touch with EALA, you can go to the next slide. And you can find our website at educatingalllearners.org. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter, or now known as X, at educate_org. And if you have any resources that you'd like to share, you can reach out to us via our email at resources@educatingalllearners.org. We offer free open access resources to educators, caregivers, and parents of students with disabilities. Again, thank you so much to everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.